Yeah.
Cool. Ricardo on whenever.
Hello and welcome to AI Scouted on Anfield Index Pro. I'm Dave Hendrick, joined as always by Mr. Karl Matchett. How are you, sir?
Well, on the downside, obviously the sad news this morning, Toto Schillaci has passed away. On the positive side, I have Jammy Dodgers and Liverpool won in the Champions League last night.
Yeah. Toto Schillaci, one of the icons of Italian 90, passes away at the age of just 59. He had been suffering from cancer and he was hospitalized with atrial arrhythmia earlier this month and passed away today. Very, very sad news. Thoughts obviously with his entire family. A very unusual career in that he was with Messina from Serie C2, the fourth division of Italy, played with them all the way up until Serie B, never really looked like he was playing at levels below his ability, then explodes in the 88-89 season in Serie B, scores 23 goals, earns a move to Juventus, scores 21 and 50, gets into the World Cup squad, top scorer in the World Cup squad, and then for 4 successive years was bang average. Three successive years was bang average in Serie A, two for Juve, one for Inter, then left to go to Japan. And to be fair, he plundered some goals in Japan, but he really did just have that 1990 sort of like, here I am, this is my moment sort of thing. Even at international level, he wins 16 caps, 12 of them are in 1990. He scores 7 goals, 6 of them are are at Italian 90. It's a really unusual career. Like it's the shortest of peaks, but he timed it perfectly.
Yeah, and I mean, to the extent of here we are decades later, and he's still like synonymous with that World Cup. It's
Mm.
his celebrations and goals you can picture when you sort of think about Italia 90. It's him almost the face of that Italia 90 side, which is quite saying something considering some of the other names who were in that team.
Yeah, and he doesn't just win the Golden Boot; he also won the Golden Ball. He placed second in the Ballon d'Or that year and was part of the All-Star team for that World Cup. And like you said, him with the big wide eyes and his arms thrown up in the air is a pretty iconic sight at this point. Um, Obviously, he broke Irish hearts, many of whom have never fully recovered on the 30th of June when Pat Bonner just couldn't deal with a long range shot and sort of dropped it into his lap, and Toto finished now from a tight angle, but he scored against Austria, Czechoslovakia, Uruguay, Ireland, Argentina, and England. And what's just notable about that is we rarely see a player at a World Cup win a golden boot without scoring a hat trick, whereas he didn't even score two in a single game. He scored in 6 different games, which is quite the achievement in itself.
It is, and I suppose it's going to be a thing, isn't it? The names and players from those tournaments that we remember first, obviously, as time goes on, will unfortunately become a regular or more regular occurrence.
Yeah, without question. Right, let's stick with Italy. Daniele De Rossi, Karl, probably after Francesco Totti, the second most iconic name to be connected to AS Roma from the last, I don't know, 40, 50 years, was brought back to the club last year as manager when they decided to sack Jose Mourinho. Jose had been hugely popular. It was clear that the primary reason for bringing in De Rossi was to quieten a fan base that were furious at Mourinho's sacking. He hadn't done well when he was Spal manager, winning only 3 of 17 matches, but he did have a pretty good start to life as Roma manager. But 4 games into the season, he has been sacked. 3 draws and 1 victory. Sorry, 3 draws and 1 defeat. Leaves them sitting 16th, but they are, of course, only 3 points off 7th place Hellas Verona. It seems a little premature to sack the man after 4 games.
Does it? Yes, it's weird, to be perfectly honest. Anyone can have a bad start to the season, just the same as we've seen teams have really, really good starts to the season. And it's equally bemusing to see the new contracts handed out in September or October, when presumably this is just part of what you've planned for over the last 5 months or whatever. I've not watched the games as such, so I don't know if Roma have been like absolutely dismal and like there's obviously no way back and that kind of thing. But results wise, yeah, four matches is just silly. Let's be honest. It's a bit of a nonsense at this stage, whether it's a couple of injuries early on, or you've changed some things over summer, or you had a fragmented preseason with players coming back at different times. There's surely got to be a better point for reassessing, maybe even like the second international break in October, which is only another 5-6 games away, something like that. And I appreciate that, if you're in something like a Premier League title race or whatever, and you've got really, really small margins for dropping points, then that's a lot of games. That's like, a quarter of them might have already gone, and you can't afford to come back from that point. But realistically, is that what Roma are involved in? It's not. Even if they presume they've been a title race this season, the margin for error is somewhat larger in Serie A at the moment. And if it's really just sort of Champions League, which I would assume would be a more realistic scenario for them, then again, you've got more scope. And it just seems very, very erratic and wild and early and poor planning to be doing it at this stage.
Yeah, exactly. Now, look, there is a different approach taken in Italian football towards managers. They are much less a fixture at clubs. They tend to be a lot more short term than what we're used to in England. We both remember the glory days of the 90s, where every single summer half the league would change managers, and every single season at least half the league would change managers. And you just look at these managers from Serie A and you'd see them, they'd be like 53, but they'd have managed about 40 clubs, and they'd have had like 3 months here and 8 months there and a week there, and it was just crazy. None of the other sort of major European leagues have seen a managerial change, other than at Benfica, Roger Schmidt was obviously sacked. Now, it's a different situation there, because most Benfica fans thought Roger Schmidt should have, actually, to be fair, there's been 2 changes. Most Benfica fans thought Roger Schmidt should have gone at the end of last season. But he was replaced by former Wolves manager Bruno Lage, and Daniel Sousa was dismissed by Braga in a very, very strange situation, where he took over at the end of last season. They were very excited to get him. Daniel Sousa, obviously longtime assistant of Andre Villas-Boas, had done really good work with Gil Vicente and then with Aruca. He takes over at Braga. He's in charge for 4 games. They win 2 and draw 2. But he was sacked after a 1-1 draw with Amadora, which is just bizarre. Nobody will be hugely surprised to learn that there's been multiple managerial sackings already in the Turkish league. Nobody, I don't think, will be hugely surprised to learn that there's been multiple sackings in the Greek league. But in the rest of the major leagues around Europe, there's been nothing. However, in England, where, you think things are a bit more patient, things are a bit more level-headed, clubs don't make rash decisions. In the Championship, Ryan Lowe left Preston after 1 game, the old mutual consent, though clearly sacked. On Monday, Steven Schumacher was sacked by Stoke. Steven Schumacher, who'd done brilliant work with Plymouth to get them promoted from League One into the Championship. Stoke were very excited that they had landed him. Stoke are currently sitting 13th in the Championship. They're 3 points outside the playoff spots. In League One, Neil Critchley was sacked by Blackpool, which, again, a little bit of a surprise given how early in the season it was, given the fact that he'd done a decent job since returning. Seems an odd one. And then in League Two, Carlisle sacked Paul Simpson a couple of weeks ago now. So what is this, Karl? Like, how do you think these decisions come about? Like, forgetting the leagues where it's just mental and you can't really predict what's going to happen. In the Championship, why are you sacking a manager 4 or 5 games into the season if you're sitting in mid-table? There's nothing in the table at that point. You're not cut adrift. And we've seen in the Championship that come the end of the season, there likely won't be a massive difference between the team who's the last one into the playoffs and, say, like, let's look at last season, right? So Norwich finished on 73 points. Preston finished 10 points behind them in 10th. Like, that's only 4 games that you would need to improve on across the course of a year. It seems just incredibly rash to dismiss a manager this early in the season in the Championship. Why do you think clubs would look at doing that?
I mean, there's only a certain number of reasons it can possibly be, let's be honest. So one is obviously the things that has nothing to do with results and the season so far or the point in the season. So that's like if there's should we say, a Scott Parker situation where he's unhappy with the board or causing problems with things that he says, or there's arguments internally, that kind of stuff. So that can happen at any point. So let's set those ones aside. If that happens, fair enough. It's got to be a hierarchy decision and doesn't matter what point of the season it is. After that, honestly, to be sacking managers at this point, I think it's one of 2 things. One, you haven't undertaken a proper assessment in the summer, and so you aren't really sure what you're looking for. You're just expecting that you get wins. The other one is obviously unrealistic or outsized expectations on one side or the other. Like, it could be from the manager who thought he was going to get more in the transfer market, or it could be from the club who thought they were going to get more wins. But like, you talk about someone like, let's say, who would you say in the Championship has changed Stoke? Stoke love getting rid of managers who have good reputations. Yeah, they love getting rid of managers who have decent reputations. I'm not really sure why, because they've been rubbish for all eternity, apart from a few years where they were famous for like long throws and being very windy and that sort of stuff in the Premier League. Stoke have won 2 of 5 so far this season, right? Now, to go up, or sorry, I should say to get a chance at going up in the Championship, to finish in the playoff spots, generally speaking, obviously this can change year to year, but generally speaking, you've got to be capable of winning fewer than every other game. Under half of your matches have to be wins, and they have under half of their matches, just under half, 2 from 3. So right now, obviously they're not in the playoff spots, but points table, goal difference, all that, after 5 matches doesn't mean anything. It doesn't show anything because nobody's played the same teams. Nobody has had a sort of 3-4 matches in a row where they show what form they've got at home or away from home or whatever it is. Nothing is shown at this point in 5 games. You've had isolated matches, that's it. So if you've won 2 from 5, and let's say, all right, in Stoke's case, let's say instead of 3 defeats, they had a draw and 2 defeats, you're pretty much on par at the moment for playoff points. So It can't be about the points. It can't be about the match returns. It can't be about any of that stuff, because you're on track for it. Like, you've just mentioned someone else just outside the playoffs. Was it in League One or something like that? Like, none of that can matter at this point because you haven't played the team who's 4th or 17th or bottom or top, or there's nothing to compare it to. So it has to be either a really, really bad or not done assessment in the summer of what you think is going to be happening, or you've run into trouble a couple of games in, or maybe some players have brought some sort of concern to you over summer and it hasn't improved, or whatever it is. Mostly, I think it's really, really terrible planning and really, really bad inability to actually undertake an assessment of where you are now and where that's going to be 2 months ago and 2 months from now. Like I said, there's nothing that we've seen in any games so far which say this is what it's going to be like for the rest of the season. It just isn't. You see teams in all the leagues have a great start to the season and be rubbish, or have a really poor start to the season and recover. Obviously, not everybody goes to those extremes, but I'm just saying that the first 3, 4, 5 matches, they're not indicative of what's going to come, or at least they
No.
don't have to be, unless that's carrying on from last season where you lost the last, I don't know, 12 of 17 matches and you said, right, things have got to improve now. You've got, only a few matches and you've got to show us you turn around. Otherwise, we're going to sack you. Well, that's stupid. Again, I think that's just terrible. If you're going to give the manager a chance to reset in the season, personally, I don't think you take into account what came last year. You've opted not to by not dismissing that manager in the summer.
See, this is the thing. I'm like, he took over in December of last season. And it's not a thing like where this is a Stoke City team that have been massively underperforming under him. This is a Stoke club that has been massively underperforming since they were relegated from the Premier League. So they were relegated at the end of 17-18. And Mark Hughes had begun that season as manager. I think it was Mark Hughes' 5th season as manager. He'd taken over, obviously, from Tony Pulis. So Pulis was there 7 years and Hughes was there just under 5. So in 12 years, they had 2 managers. Hughes gets sacked. They bring in Paul Lambert. It's a disaster, but they were going down anyway. They get to the end of that season, they part ways with Lambert. They drop into the Championship. Since going into the Championship, 16th, 15th, 14th, 14th, 16th, and 17th last season. Now, you can say, oh, well, 17th is disappointing, but realistically, it's no worse than what they've done in the previous 5 championship seasons. And the reason they brought in Steven Schumacher is because things were going disastrously. And when he arrived at the club, they were sitting in 20th. And they actually won their last 3 games to go from 20th to 17th. At one point last season, they were actually in the relegation spots. So he did keep them up. It took him a little bit of time to get things moving in the right direction, but he did keep them up. But you mentioned managers with good reputations going there and getting sacked. When they were relegated, they hired Gary Rowett, really good reputation at that point in the lower leagues. He lasted 29 games. Then they brought in Michael O'Neill. He had done a brilliant job with Northern Ireland and is obviously now back with Northern Ireland again. He, to be fair, lasted nearly 3 years, 143 games. Oh, sorry, I missed Nathan Jones. Nathan Jones took over from Gary Rowett. Jones had a really good reputation for what he had done at Luton at that point. He goes there, he lasts 38 games and out the door. O'Neill lasts 143 games. He wins 55 of them, and he's sacked. They bring in Alex Neil, who's just done a really good job at Sunderland. He lasts 67 games, and he's out the door. And now they bring in Schumacher, who'd done an incredibly good job at Plymouth, is viewed as one of the better young managers in the lower leagues. And they've decided to sack him. Like, he was 39, I think, when they hired him. He's 40 now. And they've just decided to sack him. It's just so strange. And I do wonder how much of this is actually John Walters. So if you're not aware, John Walters joined Stoke in February as interim technical director. and in April was appointed sporting director. So Schumacher has been there 3 months before he comes back in the interim role, and then 5 months when he's made permanent. John Walters, it should be pointed out, has been technical director at Fleetwood Town and Waterford in Ireland, and not done a particularly good job at either of them. But obviously he is a Stoke legend, and that's largely why he got this job. And I do wonder how much of it is him coming in and wanting to put his stamp on things.
I mean, maybe so. I had absolutely no idea John Walters was in that role at that club. To be perfectly honest, they are definitely not on my radar to keep tabs on in that way. But look, we see them be spoken about when they sign new managers and they have grand plans and all the rest of it. None of them ever followed through. This is the problem. Like none of them followed through. And like manager wise, obviously sometimes it just doesn't work out, or you don't get on with the squad, or you can't implement what you want to do. That's fine. It's not that big of an issue. It's just that it happens a lot at Stoke, and they're just one example. And you know, we did at the other end of the football scale, if you like. Last night, Liverpool beat AC Milan, and their new manager has only been there a short while, and already he's really under pressure. And talk about him leaving and all the rest of it. I'm not 100% sure what he's expected to have done at this point. Like we spoke about, Milan's obviously relatively poor start to the season, but I don't really know what else you really want from it. Like, okay, a not defeat to Parma, fair enough. You know, winning, I don't know what they played. Was it Torino at home? They played the first weekend. They didn't win. Fine, but that's the first game of the season. Like, it's not absolutely dreadful.
No.
Like, it's not great, but it's not dreadful. So, like 5 games in, he should really be like on the verge of losing his job already. And I don't know. He's got what 2 points more than De Rossi did in the league so far after 4 matches. Milan lost
1 point. Well, yeah, 2
Champions.
points more. Yeah, 2 points more.
Yeah. So I mean, like, it's an odd situation. I think that for the most part, when managers are sacked at this point in the campaign, it is very, very much on the club not having undertaken a proper realization or assessment of where they are and how they're getting to the next point, and really putting down actual markers of how you can measure that performance, like not just in terms of points across 5 matches, but you know, a 3-month period of coaching. There's got to be a feedback process. There's got to be you know, actual milestones where they get past or don't get past, where you can say like, here's what we achieved, is what we didn't achieve, and this is why. It very much feels sometimes it's just momentum, fan annoyance, managers under pressure, get asked about it in the media, owners feel like they have to get involved, sack, repeat.
Yeah, I fully agree. Someone is going to get a really good manager in Steven Schumacher. I would bet on him being back in a job before Christmas, and I think he's going to do really well. Like, for me, if you hire a manager and sack him after 4 games, 10 games, 15 games, that's just putting your hand up in the air and saying, you know what, we made the wrong decision here. We hired the wrong guy. I think it's worse to let a manager have the whole preseason to back that manager in the transfer market in whatever means you're capable of backing him, and then sack him after 5 games, because that to me shows negligence in your summer review, that you haven't actually properly taken the time to look at, is this the right guy for the club? We already have him here. We already have evidence on what he is for this club. However big the sample size is, I think it's far more damning for a sporting director and a board and ownership to have done what Stoke have done, to have done what Roma have done, than it would be if Milan were to turn around and sack Fonseca tomorrow. Because that would just be the admission of, yeah, we got the decision wrong. There was something we overlooked. If you already had the manager there and you already have a sample size of what he can do at that club, and then you sack him, you know, a handful of games into the season, I just think your entire processes are screwed up and you're probably not very good at your job. Because anyone can get one decision wrong. Anyone can buy the wrong player. Anybody can hire the wrong manager. But if you have a manager and you can see that he's not the right one, and then a month later you can, then I just think you're not very good. Let's move on. I should point out that in Scotland, I did say no other major leagues. In Scotland, Alex Levine was sacked by St Johnstone yesterday. So, there is that. Right, this weekend, Karl, Liverpool take on Bournemouth in the Premier League, fresh off the win last night. A confidence-boosting win, I would say. And Bournemouth are coming off defeat at Chelsea, a defeat at home to Chelsea, I should say. A game they probably should have won. I thought they had more than enough chances to win the game. I thought they were the better team for large portions of the game. They were happy to let Chelsea have the ball and then countered them at every possible opportunity. They had more shots on target. Obviously missed a penalty as well through Evan Nielsen. But they come away with a 1-0 defeat late in Nkunku goal. But their start of the season has been far more promising than what they made last season, when they looked completely lost. And at this point last season, we already had people calling for Iraola to be sacked. Largely the gammon talking heads that were just outraged that Gary O'Neill had been moved on. But 1 win, 2 draws, and a single defeat for Bournemouth this year. To recap their results, they drew away with Nottingham Forest, coming from behind to get a result there. They drew 1-1 at home with Newcastle and will have been disappointed not to have won that game. They lost away to West Ham in the Cup. I think that's fine. They came from 2-0 down at Goodison Park to beat Everton, and then they lose to Chelsea. I think thus far they can be quite happy with how the season is going and how results have gone for themselves.
Yeah, for sure. It's been more than reasonable start. I mean, the Chelsea game, it was quite even and quite open. The penalty was obviously a big turning point. There's no two ways about that. Sort of quite soon after they missed that penalty, it was relatively apparent, I would say, that sort of momentum had swung in the game. It wasn't like Chelsea went, finally, and all guns blazing, but it was a bit of a boost. They did sort of start to not even put pressure on. Like, I didn't think Bournemouth were massively under pressure at any point, but they did start to sort of just turn the game a little bit the other way and have a bit more possession in better territory, really. Like, Chelsea had the ball during the game, but I wouldn't say that they did a huge volume with it. Like, they had 2/3 of the possession, but Bournemouth had 2/3 of the shots. Like, that doesn't tell the whole story, but that's kind of what the game was. Bournemouth were more effective at producing something at the end of their moves than Chelsea necessarily were, but they had zero end product as it obviously turned out. Other than that, Bournemouth, results wise, is like a couple of draws is fine. Obviously, Newcastle is a pretty decent side, so even though you want to win your home games, I don't think a draw at home to Newcastle is terrible.
No.
The big comeback against Everton is obviously epic in the way that they did it, although Everton were, by most people's accounts, the better side for 70 minutes or so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, 100%. Everton were really good for 70 minutes in that game, and then I think just decided the game was won. Very, very odd. And like you said, like, Newcastle are going to be a top 4 contender this year. So, and they've started the season really well. That's the only game Newcastle haven't won. So that they haven't started the season really well. That's not accurate. The results have been really good. Their performances have been largely garbage. They should have lost at home to Southampton. They probably should have lost to Spurs. And they probably should have lost to Wolves. In fact, Newcastle could very easily be sitting on 0 points right now, with nothing changing from their performances, but the other teams actually taking their chances. just to show how. And to be fair, if that had happened, Eddie Howe would now be the most under pressure manager in Europe. But instead, they have 10 points, so they're delighted with themselves. So Bournemouth in the summer made the Enes Unal deal permanent. That had him in on loan. They signed Alex Paulson from Wellington Phoenix. He's been loaned to Auckland FC for the season. Talented young goalkeeper. They bring in Daniel Jebison from Sheffield United. He's been loaned to Watford. They bring in Kobe Mota, who's a young striker from Portsmouth. Then they sign Dean Huijsen, who I think that's one of the best signings anybody made this summer. 13 million is a bargain for a centre-back of that talent when you see what United paid for Yoro. Now, Yoro's probably a little bit more talented, but there's not a big gap between them. They signed Julian Araujo from Barcelona, which I think he's a really talented young right-back. Barca signed him, loaned him, and never gave him an opportunity, which was just bizarre, but very Barcelona. I also think Barcelona might have lost some money on him. And then they sign Evan Nielsen from Porto. They sell Kiefer Moore. They sell Dominic Solanke. They sell Gavin Kilkenny. And then they finish the window by loaning in your favourite goalkeeper, Kepa, while loaning out Neto to Arsenal along with a couple of other players that were loaned out. They've had a really good summer last year. I quite like what they've done this year. I'm not a big fan of the Kepa deal. If they wanted a new goalkeeper, I think a number of good goalkeepers moved in the summer. A number of good goalkeepers were available in the summer that they could have gone and got. There's a certain Irishman at Liverpool who I think they could have easily gotten, and I think would have made quite a bit of sense behind that young defence. But what do you make of their summer business, and how do you think that shapes them up moving forward? Obviously, adding Huijsen at the back, adding Araujo at right back for competition, and then basically swapping Solanke out and Evan Nielsen in.
I don't necessarily want to say about Evan Nielsen just yet. He's not a very good start, but generally, from what I saw of him, I don't think he's as good as Solanke anyway, just in terms of his link play, his technique. But if he gets them goals, I don't think they'll altogether care about that. Huijsen, obviously, we've barely seen so far, and if we remember when Zibani came in, it was sort of 6-8 months before he really started to get a bit of football. Well, about 4 months, and then he played sort of the end of the campaign, but really before he became a first team, it was about 8 months or so. So I don't suppose we'll see them just yet paired up, but in terms of succession progression planning, looks really, really good. Goalkeepers, yeah, we spoke before about it. Like, you get the potential to be better with Kepa than Neto was, but I kind of prefer the reliability, solidity for a team at this kind of level. Can't really complain at Bournemouth for trying to progress in that manner. It is potentially a risk, but one that obviously they feel comfortable in taking. But I think generally speaking, the squad's really well set up. I've said before, I would like another more or less combative midfield option in there. Billing, a sort of bit part player now, really, isn't he? He's not really someone who offers them too much there. So I do think that sometimes if you're going to play like a Alex Scott, let's say, when he comes back into the side, rather than a Ryan Christie alongside him, if they had someone who was a bit bigger, a bit better, a bit more of a athletic, all over the place ball winner, I just think it would benefit them a lot, the way that they play, and with the fact that they have so many offensive minded players around them. Maybe that would be the one that really helps them kick on another level, but that's also a very, very difficult thing to find unless you're going to be spending big, massive money on it. They do still have a few players who, although not young, I think actually probably getting a bit better. People like Senesi, I think he sort of improved quite a lot in terms of his, should we say, maturity, his game maturity as a defender last year. I think he became quite a bit better. He was previously someone I'd seen a lot in a back three rather than a two-man partnership. Enes Unal, if he can finally overcome injuries and sort of just be available for them more regularly. That's again 27 years old, but he's like quite a potentially decent addition to a squad that they've not really seen enough of him yet. So there's lots and lots of growth still left in this team. I like the profile of quite a lot of their defensive options now, and Araujo I think is very decent. To be honest, I expect him to be a first choice before too long. And yeah, we've talked about it before. Ouattara, Sinistera, Semenyo is looking really good over the last 18 months.
Yeah.
Tavernier, there's lots and lots of options there for them. It does look like they're putting a really good group together.
Yeah, and like there's still so much growth and development just from like the young players, like who's in Milos Kerkez, obviously still very, very young, 21, I think. Alex Scott's really, really young. Dango Ouattara is really young, and he'd started the season really well. He's out now with a minor injury, but he's gonna miss a few weeks. But huge upside with him, huge upside with Zabarni. And like you said, like Sinistera, we saw very little of him last season because he had some injuries. I think Clivert looks more comfortable this season as well. Semenyo, like you said, I mean, he's still got room for development, and he's gotten quite a lot better. And then you mentioned the ball winner, and that is the kind of the one thing they're lacking at the moment, because when they're rolling out midfields that have, whether it's Ryan Christie and Lewis Cook, say, like Lewis Cook is combative, but he's more of a ball player than anything else. The one they did bring in to be that ball player is Tyler Adams, and they spent a lot of money to get Tyler Adams. And last season he played 3 games, and he's had, I think, 3 different thigh injuries in the last year and a half. So that's a major concern. But if they could get him back and fit, I do really like what he could offer to this team. And like you said, I think there's really good defensive options there, where you're looking at right back. You've got Max Aarons, who I don't think has played yet this season, and Araujo at right back. That's really strong. In the middle, you've got Zabarni, Sinisi starting at the moment, Huijsen, young James Hill, who they're very high on. You've got Owen Bevan as well, another young defender. The club captain is Adam Smith, who for me never quite been a Premier League caliber player, but I admire what he brings to the squad, and he's obviously been there a long time. I think he's 10 years now at the club, and he's signed up on a new deal to stay for another year or so beyond this one. Like, it's a strong defensive group. The midfield has plenty of talent with Cook, Scott, Christie, Adams whenever they get him back. Billing, like you said, has become a squad player, but not a bad squad player to have. Then there's a ton of talent on the wings, and then they've got, I think, 2 good strikers. Right, do you want to pause here then and go and do your delivery?
Yeah, I was just saying that. Yeah, if you want to finish that bit, and then when you come back, we can go straight into a bit of Liverpool then, can't we?
Cool.
Nice one. Back in a sec.
All right.
All you back.
There we go. Right. You good to go?
Yep.
Okay. You good, guy?
Yeah, all good.
Cool. So with all of that said, Karl, this is clearly a decent test for Liverpool this weekend. I mean, Bournemouth came to Anfield 2 years ago under Scott Parker and got absolutely trounced 9-0. And
You still enjoy saying that, don't you?
I do. I enjoy saying it because anytime Scott Parker loses a game of football, I think that's just a good thing for the game of football. Now, they came to Anfield last season, again, early in the year. It seems to be a thing where we get Bournemouth at Anfield early in the season. It was the second game last year, our first home game. And we beat them 3-1. That's obviously the game where Alexis was sent off. And we made things more difficult for ourselves than we had to by going 1-0 down to an early Semenyo goal before goals by Lucho, Salah, and Diogo Jota won us the game. So they have improved. They have improved over the last couple of visits. But I think we can expect to see an even better team because obviously they got a lot better last season under Andoni Iraola. They started off quite poorly, only 3 points from their first 9, and then ended up getting Bournemouth's record Premier League points total. So I do think this is going to be a tough test, similar to last weekend, where I think a lot of people, including ourselves, just assumed we'd beat Forest, but we did highlight the fact that Forest were a good team. They had a lot of good players. I think the same is true here, and I do think Bournemouth have a very, very good manager.
Yeah, no question they do. They were very, very pleased to get him. There was quite a few other clubs who, prior to that summer, were considering going for Iraola. I think this is going to be a really difficult game for Liverpool. You would imagine, or we still think that it's the case that at home, how Liverpool perform is still going to be more important than how the other team do in terms of do Liverpool win. But as Nottingham Forest showed, you have to be very, very good. Otherwise, other teams who are merely good will beat you. And I think that this Bournemouth side, generally speaking, the squad makeup, the manager, and the style even that they have on and off the ball is better than Nottingham Forest's. Is edging towards sort of top half ability across the board, and will be more difficult if Liverpool aren't on the game again.
Definitely. Like, we definitely will need to be on our game here. This is a team that does carry a significant counter-attacking threat, but they're also capable of taking the ball and keeping the ball. Like, they've got players that are very, very comfortable in possession. So they don't have any real concern. You know, you see with a lot of teams that are very good at counter-attacking, that they're awful on the ball. And if you just give them the ball, they'll make a mistake and they'll gift you a goal. This Bournemouth team isn't one of those teams. They can counter-attack against the big clubs, or, you know, when we see them against a lot of the clubs kind of in their own orbit, your Crystal Palaces, whoever you want, Brentford, all those type of teams, they're more than capable of having 55, 60% of the ball and looking quite good in possession. So, difficult game for Arne Slot and his coaching staff. I think certainly a reaction needed after last weekend. We saw a good performance last night, but this is Premier League and obviously more intense, more important at the moment. We saw Arne make 2 changes to the team for last night's game. Now, I think fair to say the less said about Kostas Tsimikas' performance, the better. Though I don't think he was any worse than Andy Robertson was against Forest. Cody Gakpo came in and played really well, but he came into a position where Luis Diaz has been performing very well this season, obviously with the exception of the Forest game. So do you think, do either of them keep their spot in the team, the 2 boys that came in last night? Is there other changes to make? Would you potentially move Cody into the 9 position, bring Diaz back in on the wing, and maybe make changes elsewhere? Or what would you be looking to do if you were Arne Slot?
I think Diaz will come back in, that one's for sure. But I think that there might be the knock-on effect that there's a change there, whether that's Gakpo staying involved or whatever. I think the one that we spoke about in attack a couple of times now, Jota coming out, I wonder whether that's now the game that might happen. Most of the time he's been subbed sort of just as an in-game energy alternative is already wrapped up, that kind of sub. But I think the last 2 games has been because poor. That that's a substitution because you're not playing well and we need somebody else to do so. We didn't get that in the subs against Forest. Directly, we didn't get it with Darwin probably against Milan, but I would probably say that Gakpo's performance there suggested he could or possibly even should start a match now, or another match since he did that one. So I'm not sure whether I would say Gakpo through the middle, we would expect to get exactly the same type of performance because we saw him last night playing well because of the spaces he had, where he was able to run into and all that from the left. I think I would probably go with Gakpo starting as the 9, but with lots and lots of movability between him and Diaz, because we've seen Diaz play a lot more central as well on time to time, and certainly later on in matches as the counter-attacking threat. So if those two are able to get some sort of dovetailing going on, I think I would probably prefer to go with that on this occasion.
Yeah, and I think when you throw in Szoboszlai as 10, we've also seen Diaz from that left-sided role occupy the number 10 position. Szoboszlai go left. We know Cody can play as a 10. And I think Szoboszlai could probably hold his own if you asked him to do a 3-minute stint in that number 9 position and just be a link player. So we could get quite a lot of movement between the 3 of those. And then obviously then you just got Mo in that right-sided role continuing to play the way he has. It could open up quite a lot of space for him if the other 3, with their pace and their movement and their technical ability, are able to shift that Bournemouth defence around, and maybe we get Mo isolated in good positions and create space for him to move into that's unoccupied by a defender. I would definitely like to see Cody stay in the team. I think last night the performance warrants it, and I'm hoping that with Arne Slot, he will be more of a meritocracy than what Jurgen was ultimately. And when players play well, they get more opportunities. And when they don't play well, they don't get another opportunity straight away. We saw at the weekend, he brings on Connor Bradley. He doesn't play well. So last night, it's Joe Gomez coming on at right back. We saw at the weekend, Curtis Jones coming on. He didn't play well. So last night, it's Endo coming on. Now, Endo and Joe didn't perform well either, but it was also Joe's first appearance of the season. And I want to say Endo's first appearance since Ipswich, maybe? Had he played since?
Can't remember off the top of my head. Did he come on as sub again in another match?
I'm not 100% certain.
No, I think that was it. No, just 1 minute in the league.
Yeah, so so 1 minute in the league. So basically hadn't played this season. So I think, fair to say he'll probably get more opportunities and more of an opportunity to kind of get minutes in his legs. I assume he'll start against West Ham, although I would be curious to see if maybe Tyler Morton might get an opportunity off the bench in this one. He's been patiently waiting his turn, and I think he should get his turn. I think from a skill set point of view, not talking about level, just skill set, I think he is a better fit in this team than Wataru Endo. He's also a lot younger, so I'd like to see him get an opportunity off the bench this weekend, but I assume the midfield 3 will stay the same. I don't envisage any changes. I think West Ham is the game where Jones will start. I think Endo probably starts. And maybe Morton starts with them. Maybe Curtis starts instead of Szoboszlai, Endo instead of Gravenberch, and Morton instead of Alexis. Maybe that's what he does for that game. But I'd like to see Tyler Morton get some run in this one. Again, I assume that the front three, Salah, Gakpo, and Diaz, as you suggested, I think that's probably what it should be. And then in the cup game, you bring back in Jota, you bring in Darwin, and Chiesa, I would guess, starts for the first time in that one. I'd like to see Chiesa get more run off the bench in this one too. Maybe actually get the ball in a couple of positions where he can actually, have a run at people. So in defence, then I think it's fair to say Trent, Konate, and Virgil are nailed on. Left back, though, is a question, Karl, because Robbo had been okay until Forest. He hadn't been good, but he'd been okay. He was awful against Forest. Costas, who'd done pretty well off the bench this season, comes in last night, and there were some good moments. There were a lot of bad moments, and like we talked about the shooting last night. The first shot he took, I've watched that about 14 times now. It is one of the funniest things I've ever seen. I have no idea what he thought was going to happen, but it's not like he even took that shot with any real conviction. He just sort of swung his foot at it and hoped for the best, and it was truly awful. Who are you starting at left back? Is Joe Gomez an option to go there?
Not after last night if Costas isn't. No. I think Robertson probably comes back in by virtue of not being any part of anything to do with the bad performances. Yeah, I think he'll probably come back in for this one, assuming he's fully fit and everything. And you want a better performance from him. And to be honest, if this is what we get, using Robertson most of the time, but then bringing him out for every third or fourth match, something like that, so that he does rest and that he doesn't play all the minutes, maybe you get better performances or more better performances from Robertson, and managing his game load is something we've been asking for like 3-4 years. So perhaps that's a way to do it. But then, if Costas does start playing well, then like you just said, there's got to be a route into the team for him. But I don't think last night was that one.
No, definitely not. Definitely not based on last night. I would like to see Joe given a run at left back soon, because I thought of the three of them, he was the best of the three last season. He was certainly the best overall, but I thought he was the best of the three of them who played left back. And I thought that run where he was our starting left back was probably our best run of the season as well. So I'd like to see him just get that opportunity. And I do think him and Diaz can potentially work well. It's a strange thing with Joe. Like, he's played a lot of football at right back, and at times he can look really good. At times he looks like football is new. I think Trev described him as a make-a-wish kid last night. At centre-back, he's been excellent, but he's also had some poor runs. But at left-back, he has generally, now it's far more limited sample size, but he has generally looked far more comfortable at left-back for us over his tenure at the club than he has, and more consistent than in either of the other two positions.
I would agree with that. It's been more consistent at left back. The performances have generally been of a good level, and you can even go back to when he first got to the club and broke in. That was at left back, and that was better performances as well. I'm absolutely not averse to seeing Gomez in at left back. I'm not sure I see it for this specific game, just because of how Bournemouth have been setting up. You're not really going to get Semenyo cutting in on his left foot kind of thing, so the right-footed inside defensive trait isn't necessarily the one you make the most of in this exact opponent. But at some point, yes, it makes sense. A lot of opponents obviously still play with inverted forward, and you're going to get good matchups there. He's got good speed. He's probably a bit more agile than Tsimikas is in terms of changing directions and stuff, but it hasn't looked. I know last night was a very short spell of time, but it didn't look particularly fully fit. And I'm not really sure if it's the right way of saying it, or maybe just sharp is,
Sharp,
on the
yeah,
turn.
probably just a lack of match fitness.
But like even like not the weird touches of the ball and the clearances which went nowhere and that kind of thing, but like even like turn and direction last night he was put down a couple of times just because he couldn't alter that change of momentum that he had, which usually he's quite good with, I think.
Yeah, I'd fully agree on that. That's normally one of the things Joe excels at, is that ability to change direction quite quickly. You'd hope that it is just a case of lacking match sharpness. Simple as that, that there's nothing else there. And Joe can often have that where he comes in from the cold and he does look a bit iffy. You kind of have to stick with him and give him, the minutes to get up to speed, which unfortunately he hasn't had yet this season. I think he probably starts against West Ham at centre back. I think him and Kwanzaa probably start there. So my guess is like you say, it's Robertson. So we're looking at Ali, Trent, Ibu, Virgil, Robbo, Gravenberch, Alexis, Dominic, Mo, and then the other two positions are the question mark. I think Gakpo will start. So it's just a matter of whether he starts with Jota, so Gakpo's on the left, or he starts with Diaz, so Gakpo's through the middle. My preference, and as you said, yours would be Diaz comes in and Jota comes out. And I think that would be the right decision. I don't think Jota's been good in the last... Like, he was fine against United, but I thought he was very poor against Forest and pretty poor last night again. He doesn't look sharp in front of goal.
No, he doesn't, and that's generally where you want Jota, isn't it? Because he's just got that ability to finish, just to find a shot, find himself in a position, find himself in the right spots to get rebounds and cutbacks and knockdowns and second balls and scuffed ones and everything like that. They're the ones that usually fall his way, and he can put them in the way that he did in the end, and missed one against Ipswich in the first game. He was sort of just there, wasn't he? And that's where it ended up. So while he's not at that point, I wouldn't say he's anywhere near as bad as he was before his good run last year and then subsequent injury. Prior to that, when he was out injured and came back and out injured and came back and out injured, he was bad, like properly bad for like 18 months. So I wouldn't say he's like anywhere near that level. Like his technical ability at the minute is fine. It's just not great. It's like the timing is not always there, but it was a good ball through for, was it Diaz's goal on the counter attack that he played that lovely time through ball? So like it's not anywhere near as bad as it was at that point, but it's just not good. And I would say from a first touch and finishing perspective, I know it's not the case with a lot of teams now, and certainly not with Liverpool over the last few years, but previously you'd want your number 9 and your number 10, or the effective players in those roles, to be the really, really on form, tight, sharp, excellent technique ones. And probably at the minute, Szoboszlai and Jota are the two out of the front 6, shall we say, who are least on it. I know Szoboszlai scored last night, but taking into account everything over the last, all 5 games this season, I would say those are the two who are most below par. So if Cody comes in, or if there is an alteration to let someone else have a go, see what they're at, let Jota push himself to work hard to get back in the team and play well and so on and so forth, then you're adding a little bit more to the front line, and hopefully that works out well for Liverpool. That's the whole point of having the squad after all.
Exactly. And obviously with the West Ham game coming up midweek, there is going to be opportunities for other players, so they'll get their minutes there and they'll get the opportunity to show what they're capable of, and maybe make a bit of a case then to get minutes in the next Premier League game. But for this game, Mr. Matchett, what is your prediction?
I think it's going to be a hard one. I'm going to go for a 2-1 Liverpool win, but honestly, I wouldn't be wildly shocked if this one was a draw, but we do need to get back to winning ways, so I will back us to do so. 2-1.
You've stolen my prediction again.
Sorry.
Maybe will
go first next week.
I will go then. I'll actually go with the draw, in the hope that, like with last night where I picked a draw, it spurs us to a win. So I'll go 1-1 and hope that we can, like you say, get back to winning ways, because that's what the most important thing is right now, is just to win your games. It doesn't matter how you win them. as long as you're winning them. Right. Is there anything you want to plug before we go? Anything coming up on the Indie or anywhere else?
There will be a Liverpool piece ahead of the weekend. On FootMob, we've got Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid pieces this week. One on Jude's slightly altered role, one on Atletico's rebuild or latest rebuild, or however you want to look at it. And
The Revolution?
well, should we go that far? The Conor Gallagher-led revolution. I'm not sure I like the sound of it, but
They thought there was ever going to be a revolution with Diego Simeone still in charge. I'm not sure.
no.
You could give him prime Messi, prime. You could give him the 09 to 2012 Barcelona team, and he's still going to have them playing Diego Simeone's way, and that's just what it'll be. And if Iniesta doesn't like it, well, he can sit himself on the bench.
Iniesta would be wing back.
100%. 100%. Busquets would be a centre back. Mascherano would be in midfield, booting people up in the air. He'd love Puyol. He'd like Piqué. That'd be the back three: Puyol, Busquets, and Piqué. Yeah, Iniesta as a wing back. Lamine Yamal as the left wing back, getting up and down the touchline. Yeah. Right. That's it from us for this week. We will be back next week with multiple pods again. Not sure we'll do one for the West Ham game, but we might just touch on it if we get an early week one done. And then obviously there'll be one for the following Premier League game. But that's it. Take care of yourselves. Thanks for listening. Goodbye.